Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, gambling was seen as a vice, a degenerate activity for degenerate people, a distraction from God, moral purpose, and honest hard work. Motivated only by greed and short-sighted profiteering, it had been pushed to the very margins of civilized society. A group of brave pioneers dreamed of a home for those cast aside. In the rush for a just and equitable world, a place where you could bet the over, lose your entire next season's wages, have to sell off your children, and be hailed as a hero when you came back for more. These visionaries banded together to start a new city free from heavy-handed taxing. It would be christened Federation City, which in time would be shortened to a colloquial Fed City, and then just to the city, and then back to Fed City to avoid confusion with other local municipalities. Fed City would be a gleaming beacon of hope in a dreary world devoid of excitement and instant payoff. It would be the glittery, shiny home for all varieties of debauchery, be indecency and licentiousness in the Middle Ages, where the main attraction is distraction, where the main industry is people arriving, emptying their pockets into the casinos, their dinner into the streets, bile, and heading home once more. Gambling was not only condoned, it was encouraged, sometimes even encouraged by the end of a very sharp knife. Street card and dice games, seemingly materialized out of nowhere, and three-card Monte, would be elevated to the level of an Olympic sport. Bookies could be found 3 deep on every corner. Casinos quickly sprang up, and odds-makers soon outnumbered actual citizens 2 to 1. Gambler, which started off as a bit of a joke, had grown into a sort of a mascot for the city. Bend would evolve further and eventually be adopted as the state religion. No one knew how it happened, but they sure as hell weren't going to question the validity of Gambler when they had an afternoon leg of their parlay that was still yet to pay off. In time, all Fed City business would be done under the guise of appeasing Gambler, and juicing the pot became a religious rite. Money piled into Fed City, and it eventually grew until it swallowed, put up any neighboring communities, and more importantly, any competition. So for hundreds of years this oasis existed, and in it a unique A-culture slowly emerged, congealing into existence out of the rampant ooze of shyst. Pilferers and peddlers, vibrant communities were established, and a social order maintained for generations. And in this utopia of decadence and deprivation, a mosaic of intricate traditions was cobbled together. At the end of every summer, an annual tournament would plunge the city into an orgy of speculative betting and poor decisions. In this tournament, 12 teams representing each of the 12 communities of Fed City would vie for the illustrious title of Federation Champion. Welcome to Fed City. The charter of the Confederated City-State of Federatia, which would be commonly known as Fed City. There is no evidence as to the exact date the city was founded, but we do know that it was on a Tuesday due to the specific nature of the lunch order written on the back. It was an oasis of sin and vice. We also know that its primary industry buys corruption, and that the apothecaries of Fed City are credited, A, with the invention of a dozen varieties of crab shampoo. Every year, people from all around would stream into the city to witness the varying communities wage war against each other in an epic 17-week battle royal. Each community would field their own team and week by week try to climb to the top of the Fed City ladder of chaos, looking to strike, bit rich, and be the ones cheered and adored by the crowds at the end of the tournament, all while bringing glory back to the streets where they were born and raised. Historical documents have revealed the names of these communities and by their histories, as well as another interesting wrinkle of Fed City. Blues society and urban planning the boroughs. Well before New York City, Federation City pioneered the use of strategic community groups called boroughs. In time, there would arise a unique identity associated with each borough that would come to help define the flavor of the different localities of Fed City and their citizens. Sometimes boroughs would consist of allies, sometimes enemies, but they would all compete internally, against each other during the annual tournament for additional prizes, glory, and local bragging rights. But while the individual communities of Fed City were named conventionally by their residents, after their residence or by a defining feature, the boroughs were named somewhat antagonistically by the neighboring citizens. Today, we look at the first of three boroughs, Three Sheets. Three sheets to the wind is an idiomatic term referring to being drunk or intoxicated. The phrase has nautical origins, suggesting a ship with 3 sheets, rope loose, and blowing in the wind is out of control. The people from our first collection of communities were affectionately known throughout the city as the drunken fucking idiot, whose half-dead bodies clogged up the streets each morning, and full-dead bodies clogged up the canals every weekend. These booze hounds and stoners might pull off a near miss with sobriety every few days, but for the most part they lived life deep inside flavor country. Forget being sailors. These lubbers could barely stay upright on steady land. Due to geography of Fed City, 3 sheets encompassing the eastern half of the city, road-bound booze that came into the city on the eastern side usually never reached the center. It didn't take long for merchants to realize that inebriants must be smuggled in by sea. These communities featured the highest pub-to-citizen ratio in recorded history. The streets almost flowed with illicit alcohol, earning 3 sheets the additional nickname of the Venice of Fed City, beer, as well as the puke hole of Fed City, and the cesspit of Fed City. Signature features of 3 sheets were the installation of additional gutters along avenues to aid in the removal of a rather horrifying list of fluids and innumerable dinar shops open until 3 a.m. Also, it has been documented that the preferred method of executing criminals in 3 sheets was to hurl the criminals through the air via catapult, trying to land their bodies in a small hole. It would inspire the much later invention of cornhole. Out of the 4, Dallas Exchange was the lone community that maintained at least a veneer of respectability, and that was simply due to better PR and the geographic fact that it tilted down towards the sea so badly that its most egregious drunks would all eventually stumble and roll their way down into the water, leaving a higher percentage of the population able to remain on their feet on any given day compared to the others. Sandalburg was full of weird barefoot hippies. No one in their right mind walked the panhandle after dark or before dark, and Carlsbad was the only part of Fed City where street stabbings come buy one get one free. Sandalburg Valley is less a neighborhood, and more a permanent haze drifting above a muddy commune of half-clothed idealists. The name itself is the result of the infamous Great Shoe Revolt, when locals burned mountains of sandals in protest of foot prisons and declared they would live the rest of their lives unburdened. Sadly, the clerk processing the initial paperwork was either drunk, stoned, or barefoot on the job, and thus Sandalburn became Sandalburg. The citizens never bothered correcting it. They were too busy proclaiming themselves liberated from leather tyranny. Their flag, prominently featuring the iconic mudfoot unencumbered, flaps lazily over a vast seas of shanties, tents, and yurts. The people of Sandalburg Valley insist they are the most enlightened community in the city, though most outsiders call them just as filthy as the hobos from Panhandle, but admit that they happen to have better drugs. Remaining historical artifacts from this part of Fed City are almost exclusively bong, beer, and every argument is settled with a hacky sack contest. It is also Fed City's undisputed hub of opium dens and grow houses, where one can find everything from rare hallucinogenic herbs to mushrooms that make you hear color. Panhandle is the city's unofficial welcome mat, though most travelers would argue it feels more like tripping over a chamber pot at the front door. Outsiders are almost always mugged upon entry to the city, but locals defend the practice as a form of civic toll. By high price to pay to enter into Fed City through a part that is as sanitary as a corduroy toilet seat. Located along the main road into the city, picks its name from the so-called craft of panhandle making, an industry that produces more beggars than cookware. The residents claim to be artisans, but their handiwork is usually bent scrap metal, mindlessly hammered into vaguely handle-shaped lumps, often sold with the kind of desperation that suggests robbery is Plan B, and Plan B is invoked often. The district reeks of piss jugs and wet dog, with garbage piles forming natural landmarks. They'll say turn left at the smoking hole straight on past the carcass heap, and if you hear growling, you've gone too far. The people of Panhandle are a unique breed of transient, bend self-proclaimed urban nomads, many of whom wear wool toques year-round in defiance of both weather and common hygiene. Wild dogs roam freely here, sometimes kept as companions, sometimes indistinguishable from the residents themselves. Their most notable historical figure who wasn't a dog was a common grifter, who once convinced a visiting noble to pay him 3 silver for an enchanted panhandle that was, in fact, just a stick. Dollars Exchange is the glittering heart of Fed City commerce, where the books are legendarily greasy and every cobblestone feels like it has been mortgaged 3 times and resold at a premium. Originally the site of foreign currency exchange, it has since ballooned into the city's primary marketplace, a bazaar where every stall is a trap and every handshake a contract you'll regret. What started as a tax scam and would continue on as a tax scam, the All Chuck franchise blossomed into a pillar of the community. A community where the locals are ruthless capitalists who would gladly sell you the shirt off your back, first charging you a removal fee, a laundering surcharge, and a sentimental value tax. Residents of Dollars Exchange are notorious for their creativity in scamming. Nowhere else will you be cheated with such professionalism. Indoors Exchange, even when you're being robbed, they'll try and upsell you to the Platinum Victim Membership package. The name Carlsbad was chosen to frighten outsiders, but it was in no way required, as the inhabitants were a hideous mix of skitch-eyed anarchists, agitators, and feral children who sharpened their teeth, and tourism would not be a familiar concept there. The only legitimate businessmen are gravediggers, knife sharpeners, and surgeons. Locals claim the area was named after some long-forgotten Duke Boer warlord, but in truth, the founders just wanted something that sounded spooky. A tradition that would continue with the naming of Skull Island, in an attempt to dissuade local authorities from stopping there. Not that it wasn't true, however. Skull Island was known as a heap that was more bones than land. But those were the good bones. Buy their retirement bones. And they sure as hell didn't want some tax agent digging around in there. Carlsbad, a perpetual riot with a postal code, where knife-point muggings are so common that even muggers travel in pairs, lest they be mugged. It's the only part of the city where emergency rooms have a frequent visitor punch card. Carlsbad, come for the stabbing. Stay because you just got fucking stabbed. Every house here proudly displays a pile of menacing skulls around their door, as both decoration and deterrent. Some families are said to swap them out for nicer skulls before dignified company arrive. In fact, skulls are a big part of Carlsbad imagery and identity. The brawl that broke out during the community's flag design was still talked about fondly generations later. First, they wanted a fucking eagle, then a skull, then an eagle fucking a skull. Eventually, the survivors would land on the infamous, deranged eagle with single skull in its clutches and a banner with the local saying, "Caw, caw," which residents were known to scream from the rooftops from time to time. Notable traditions in Carlsbad include Revolt Tuesday, which repeated every week for as long as anyone could remember. No one could recall what the original revolt was about, but traditions matter. And so Firefighting Wednesday was also implemented to keep the fun going. This year, the borough of Three Sheets takes the field in the Fed City fantasy football season. Who will rise? Who will bleed? Who will piss in the gutters of glory? As the ladder of chaos rises ever higher into the stormy sky, it's up to the community heroes to save the day, or at least get some treasure out of this. Only one thing is certain. There will be piss in the gutter's core. The battle of the boroughs. The All-Chuck, the evil empire, the beatnik burnouts, the littlest hobo. Discover what everyone's been talking about. The Battle of the Boroughs returns this fantasy season. It's all here, the entire magical world of Fed City, now featuring collectible cards,